If you happen to go to New Orleans and you make the mistake of mentioning to the people there that their city was undone by a storm or by a hurricane, you will have your head handed to you by a local, and rightly so, because uh, the hurricane that passed New Orleans, called Katrina, was actually somewhere between a Category 2 and a Category 3. It was actually quite weak as it glanced off of New Orleans and went towards the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. It was a hurricane that all of the canal walls and all of the levees were supposed to be able to sustain themselves against easily. Everything up to a Category 3 was assured. The storm didn't overtop the levees. The storm didn't destroy the levees. A barge did. A barge that was not secured and was left in the industrial canal struck the retaining wall and destroyed the lower Ninth Ward.
This story reflects the failure of governmental agencies like FEMA in preventing or even mitigating harm to the citizens it was designed to protect. This kind of story of institutional incompetence is fortunately all too familiar to the average citizen. FEMA's disastrous response was the result of poor planning and unnecessary bureaucratic barriers. In a report issued a year after Katrina by the Department of Homeland Security, the agency found a multitude of problems within the core of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. According to CNN, before the storm hit, FEMA was, quote, ill-prepared to conduct the massive search and rescue functions, end quote. The report also mentions a lack of manpower, less focus on natural disasters, and more focus on terrorist attacks, and uncertainties regarding the roles and responsibilities of officials helping to coordinate disaster relief. The biggest problem with FEMA's response was the bureaucratic barriers preventing aid from other agencies, states, or even countries. According to CNN, hundreds of firefighters from other counties and cities who offered help relief efforts were sent to Atlanta, where they had to listen for 2 days on presentations on the history of FEMA before being sent to New Orleans. An article in the New York Times states that FEMA's paperwork slowed down the evacuations of patients from the airport. That same article went on to mention that private medical companies sent fully trained and licensed personnel down to New Orleans, but FEMA rejected the help from these individuals because the doctors and nurses weren't certified members of a national disaster medical team. Other instances of rejecting aid for bureaucratic reasons include turning away 15 tons of food from Germany, refusing the Red Cross from delivering food to those in need in the affected areas, and refusing the help of Amtrak in helping with the evacuations. Adding insult to injury, FEMA actively tried to censor the press in order to conceal their own incompetence. In an article in the Washington Post, Tom Rosenstiel, director for Columbia School of Journalism, mentioned that FEMA's refusal to take journalists down to the flooded area was, quote, about managing images and not about public taste or human dignity.